Chapter 26. After attack. John Hamman, 31. Cretaceous. Jenny woke up gasping. Air. She needed air. She was being smothered by something. She started pushing all around her. Something fell away from her face, and she sucked in clean, fresh air, one lungful after another, as she remained there resting, breathing. Jenny realized the air was actually not so fresh. It was only relative. She started to realize where she was and froze in fear. Were they still here? She was warm, but the air outside was nice and cool. It was dark. As her eyes adjusted, she could see stars in the sky. She didn't recognize them. They didn't look right. She strained her hearing, but there was nothing. The night was quiet. Were they warm-blooded enough to hunt at night? Everything said yes. The way they moved implied a high metabolism, and they certainly had enough insulation with the feathers. Did they see an infrared? Her body would almost glow in the dark in this cold night. In a world filled with cold-blooded animals, Jenny would glow like a beacon in the darkness. She couldn't stay here. Not only the smell, but the idea of being in a literal dung heap was repulsive. It was a warm, safe place to spend the night, but she simply could not do it. She started pushing the balls off her, making her way out of the pile. It was mostly dry, but she was sure she looked a sight. Most importantly, this would without a doubt cover her smell. She didn't know what other senses her hunters had, but she knew they tracked by scent. This was her chance. If she could get out of their territory before dawn, she might still make it. Jenny tried to stand and fell back down. Her leg would not support her. It would not straighten. She had to work and stretch it to get it to let go and straighten all the way. She awkwardly climbed to her feet and managed to stand. Somewhere out there was the river. She took a couple of hobbling steps and then forced herself to stand erect. The leg made her slow. The moon was a waxing gibbous, almost overhead. It was still early in the night. She made her way across the wide swath that the grazing herd of sauropods had made, passing through to who knows where. She wished she could have seen them. Brontosaurus. It was one of the first names she had learned as a child. Of course, brontosaurs were from an earlier time. The family had grown to include many others, some much bigger, but to her, all sauropods were Brontosaurus, her favorite dinosaur. But her grandfather had called them something different. Mokulambembe. He had given it an African name. Now that made more sense. Perhaps if she found him, he would tell her the story behind that. She re-entered the cover on the other side. The moon lit the scene around her, casting crazy shadows. She knew the moon was actually closer to the Earth in this era, but not by how much. How much shorter would the month be? She couldn't tell from looking at it. It was open enough that she could see to make her way. Her mind conjured horrors in every shadow, a monster under every tree. She couldn't let her mind run away from her. She was in the territory of a large pack of aggressive predators. She also knew the density of animals on the ground in any environment was low. She would have to be profoundly unlucky to stumble across their pack in the dark. As long as she didn't follow game trails or something stupid like that, the odds were that she would be fine. Slowly, Jenny trudged on through the night, trusting in the cold to help keep her safe. She drank from her one remaining canteen. She had lost blood, but knew she would need the water tomorrow. She did not know how long she walked for. It occurred to her that she didn't know how many hours were in a day here. The Earth's rotation had also slowed as energy transferred from the Earth to the moon. She knew the days would be shorter here, but not by how much. Her mind wandered as she continued to march along with her slow limp. She checked the compass around her neck. It had a glow in the dark needle. She was able to keep a roughly easterly direction. It might be her imagination or the poor light, but it seemed that the vegetation was getting more dense and taller. Could the land be getting wetter? Was she getting closer? She welcomed it, even if it meant she had to take more detours around the darker patches. It would be much easier in the light, but the cold night was hers. Even with the chill, she welcomed it. Her kind were meant for this. They owned the night and the cold in a way no reptile ever could. She wished she had a crutch, a cane, a walking stick, anything that would help. All she could do was press on. The dawn found her stumbling along under taller trees, and some of them were now actual trees, not various forms of overgrown ferns. Conifers grew here. They were new on the scene, relatively at least, but like her kind, they, along with the grasses, would one day dominate this world. The ferns would be pushed aside, and with them, whole new forms of life would emerge. Once the grasses evolved as alternatives to the tough, fibrous ferns, animals would no longer have to be so huge. The size of the dinosaurs was based on the size of their guts. The carnivores grew in proportion to the herbivores, big enough to hunt whatever was their prey. As the morning became warmer, Jenny started to look for a place where she could stop. Finding a particularly thick patch of growth, she wormed her way into the middle of it and was able to hunker down between the larger ferns where she was concealed. She took another drink from her canteen. She would have to find water soon. She went through her pockets. She still had the batteries. The device was still there. She found another power bar and started to eat it. Reconsidering, she broke it in two and put the other half back in her pocket. She still had the Browning pistol, but had only 2 full magazines and 1 partial. While she was thinking about it, she swapped a full mag for the partial and put that one back in the pouch on her belt. She had her grandfather's belt and his knife in a sheath on the left side. The compass was still around her neck. One leg of her pants was in tatters. She decided to wait to look at her leg until she was ready to move on. She didn't want to rest here with any more blood smell than she had to. She took another antibiotic. At least she had a good supply of those, but she was not looking forward to cleaning the wound. Jenny curled up and gave in to her exhaustion, falling asleep in the middle of a thicket of large ferns. It was late afternoon when she awoke. Jenny slowly opened her eyes and kept still, listening intently for any sign of dinosaurs in the area. She heard nothing. Looking up through her ferns, she saw a bird. No, not a bird, but a dinosaur. It landed on a large branch, grasping not only with its feet, but with the claws on its wings. They were the thumbs of the animal. It was small, and she recognized it immediately. It had 2 long feathers forming a twin tail. A Confucius ornis. The museums had many fine specimens showing the twin feathers that made it so distinctive. They always reminded her of the scissor tails she saw in Texas in her childhood. She wondered if it was male or female. One theory held that only one gender had the distinctive long-tail feathers. Unlike the earlier protobirds, it had a bill without any teeth, but most importantly, it fed on aquatic animals. It liked water. She watched it closely. When it took off, she noted its direction until it was out of sight. She could not put it off any longer. She took off her belt and opened the rest of the contents of the other pockets. The large main pocket held emergency supplies, and the 2 side pockets housed additional materials: antibiotics, analgesics, a suture kit, tweezers, hemostats, and some spare bandages. The first thing she did was take one of the painkillers. This was going to hurt. She didn't want to damage the pants more than necessary. The bandage was actually on over the pants fabric, so she had to remove it first. Her leg ached. She didn't doubt there would be more to come. She removed her pants and got her first good look at her leg. It was a mess of clotted blood. She poured a little of her water on the corner of the old bandage and began to clean the wound. It took a lot of work to get rid of the congealed blood. The quick clot had made a mess of it. She had to stop several times, to breathe and wait for the dizziness to pass. By the time she was done, she felt exhausted. But this was only the beginning. She opened the suture kit. It contained sterile sutures, pre-threaded on small curved needles, a pair of sterile gloves, and 2 syrettes of lidocaine. She cleaned the outside of the wound as well as she could with an alcohol wipe and began to inject the lidocaine along both sides of the wound. Poking at it, she was relieved to find it blessedly numb. Now, she had to get this done before it wore off. Taking up the hemostats, she fished out the first of the sutures and started to work closing the tear in her leg. It was awkward working on her own leg, but she did get the wound closed. How aggressive would the bacteria be here? In theory, her modern immune system would have an advantage over older strains of bacteria. On the other hand, everything here was so old it might act as a novel infection. She could be killed by the smallest scratch. She would have to trust the antibiotics. She buried the bloody bandage, but reused the elastic wrapper with a fresh gauze bandage. She settled back and rested after taking another of the pain relievers. When she was feeling better, she used one of the remaining sutures to sew up her pants. It didn't look much better than her leg when she was done. Dressing, she accepted that she needed to move. Her canteen was now empty, having used the last of it cleaning her wound, but she knew water was somewhere nearby, and she had an idea of the direction. It was a small, stagnant pond. It was already halfway to being dry. She stopped and waited, trying to spot anything that might be lurking. Not seeing any danger, she cautiously approached the water's edge and filled her canteen. She used a piece of her shirt as a pre-filter to try to catch the worst of it before it went into her canteen. She dropped 2 iodine pills in the canteen and shook it. Her water filter was lost. This would have to do. As she turned to leave, she spotted something she recognized. It was a young sabal palmetto, or sabal palm, perhaps the longest surviving species of that family, now only newborn in this world. Her favorite name for it was swamp cabbage. She pulled out her grandfather's knife and began to cut it off, as close to the ground as she could. She needed the heart. Jenny withdrew away from the pond. Once she was far enough away that she felt safe, she found a place to make a fire. She peeled the section that she had cut from the young plant, exposing the core. She roasted it over the fire, her back propped against a tree. Her leg hurt. Once it was nicely golden brown, she cut the plant into sections and was able to munch on the pieces. It took her mind back to a summer she spent in Florida. Not bad, if a little bland. It would be much better if it had some sauce to absorb flavor from. Jenny didn't want to move. Her leg ached, but she needed to move away from her fire. She levered herself up and moved off deeper into the forest, looking for a safer place to spend the night.